Good evening to all of our RTO Doctor followers, and once again I apologise well and truly for the late session tonight, and I promise you as a result it is going to be a short one, well, as short as I can make it anyway. I just wanted to briefly touch on the topic of initial RTO registration this evening, and if it applies, CRICOS registration with that, or any additional licensing, accreditation, registration requirements that might take place, as we talked about the other day. But the reason why I wanted to touch on the topic of initial RTO registration this evening in a 30 Days, 30 Tips second series instalment was because what we seem to be seeing more and more of in the rectification and AAT matter space at the moment is that a lot of providers or potential providers are actually engaging with consultants and other people to assist them to develop their application for RTO registration, and realising when it's all too late that they haven't got everything that they need in place before the audit arrives. So what I mean by that is often we will get requests for quote, for example, for an initial RTO registration, and people come to us with these wild expectations about having up to 4 qualifications, and it might be that they want a certificate 4 in business, a diploma of business, an advanced diploma of business, and they might also want an advanced diploma of leadership and management, for argument's sake. They have all these wild expectations, and then they want to do CRICOS as well, or they might want to do a certificate 3 in commercial cookery, a certificate 3 in hospitality, a certificate 4 in hospitality, a certificate 4 in commercial cookery, a diploma of hospitality management. And so what they do is they round off all of these qualifications that they actually want to register on their scope when they first register. But there's a couple of things that they don't necessarily understand or take into consideration. So the first thing is, if you haven't been involved in the vocational education training sector previously, you may not be aware of just how challenging it can be to run an RTO, and even more so a CRICOS RTO, with no prior experience. And so opening up an RTO as soon as you get registration with all of those qualifications on scope and very little experience is almost a recipe for disaster. But the other reason why we find that a lot of applications are being rejected from ASQA after the potential provider has invested a significant amount of money in the application fees and getting a facility in some cases, a lease on a commercial kitchen maybe. They may also have had to purchase a whole lot of resources, whether that be in the hospitality area or individual care or whatever the case may be. They've invested a lot of money. What some people will also do is they will also invest a significant amount of money in off-the-shelf resources, training and assessment materials that have been developed by a company, and sometimes that's okay if you contextualise them prior to submitting them and you have them industry validated and you consult with industry in the development and contextualisation of those resources. But it's actually not okay to just have these random resources that you've purchased off the shelf and submit them as they are. There's also a range of potential providers who submit training and assessment strategies that have just been randomly put together, and it's almost a copy and paste job for each qualification, and there's not much difference between them. Not much thought or consideration has gone into the industry consultation process, how you've engaged with industry, an analysis of the feedback that you've received, how you're incorporating the volume of learning. The development of a training and assessment strategy needs to be individualised for each qualification and each target group and each delivery and assessment mode. And what we're finding is that people who are looking to start in the industry are engaging with people who may not necessarily have the knowledge, skills and experience to be able to put together an application that is comprehensive enough to meet the regulatory requirements of the current vet quality framework. So what we would encourage you to do is make sure that you have all of the training and assessment materials for every training product, which means every unit of competency that is included in any qualification or application that you've got. So if, for example, you've got a qualification that has 15 units of competency in it, there's an expectation that at audit you will have training and assessment resources for 15 units of competency. If you've got 10 qualifications that you're applying for on your scope of registration at the time of registration, there's an expectation that you'll have the training and assessment resources and facilities to cater for all of those units for each of those qualifications, and that you'll have the staffing available to you if that application is approved. And a lot of people don't realise that. A lot of people seem to think that they've got a good deal from a consultant who will offer them an application for RTO registration for $20,000, for example, and they do one training and assessment strategy. They might do a couple of units of competency, and that will be suitable for the purposes of registration. You've got a good deal because it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg, and you've got your application in. The problem, however, does come when it comes time to audit and the regulator arrives and is expecting to see all of the training and assessment materials for all of the units, for all of the qualifications you've applied for. They're expecting to see the facilities and resources that you have in place to operate the RTO that you've applied for. They're looking to see the employment contracts or proposed employment contracts for all of the staff that you say that you have in order to run those qualifications. And if you don't have all of those things available, then you find yourself in a position where you're deemed critically non-compliant and your application is automatically rejected. Excuse me. So what happens then? You have sometimes in historic ASQA practices, for example, you had 20 working days to rectify the materials and submit new evidence and hopefully get registered. However, as you can see through various reports that ASQA have released recently, they are no longer going to be embellishing the 20 working day period, and now they're going straight to sanctions. So what that means is that if you receive a cancellation or a rejection letter straight off the bat, it means that your only hope is really to apply to the AAT for a review. In some cases, they may give you an opportunity to appeal the decision internally, in which case you might have the 28 days to explain why you don't believe that that application should be rejected, but that's not necessarily always the case. So read the fine print very carefully on the communication and correspondence that you receive from the regulator once you do receive that notification from them regarding the outcome of your audit. But more importantly, what I wanted to bring to your attention tonight was when you do ask a consultant for a quote, please make sure that the quote is comprehensive and that it covers all training and assessment materials for every qualification that you're applying for on scope, because if it doesn't, you are going to be deemed non-compliant, your application will be rejected. And if it's rejected, it means that all of that financial investment that you've made, all of that time and energy that you invested in putting together an application is going to be of no use. It's going to be a waste of time and money, and you may not recover it. And what we find is that people often get to that position and they can no longer afford to do the rectification or to go to the AAT and ask for a review of a decision or whatever may be the case, because they've already paid out substantial amounts of money. Now, there used to be a time where we used to say to people, well, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. However, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore, because what we're finding is that less experienced consultants are now charging top rates, as well as the more experienced consultants. And so from a price range perspective, it's not necessarily easier to identify those consultants that have got more experience. So please do your due diligence when you're looking for a consultant to be able to assist you with your initial RTO application, whether it be just plain RTO or whether it be RTO CRICOS, whether you've got additional registration requirements involved as well. Please make sure that you are getting all of the resources and materials that you need before that application is lodged, because it could be that you lodge your application and then your audit occurs within 6 weeks of your application being lodged, in which case you may not be ready. So just make sure that make sure that your application is ready, that it's a complete application, that you are getting everything that you are required to have for the purposes of registration, because the expectation from the regulator is, of course, that if they deem you compliant and they recommend you for registration, the day that you get your RTO ID, your RTO number, they expect that you will be opening the doors and you will be ready and available to start delivering and assessing your training. So please make sure that you do your checks, make sure that you have everything available before you get to audit, and make sure that you do your due diligence on any consultants and off-the-shelf products and so forth that you will be dealing with as part of your registration process. And hopefully you won't need an AAT process or any rectification. On that note, I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening, and hopefully you will follow us tomorrow and we'll have a much earlier 30 days, 30 tips. Thanks very much, and bye for now.